Good afternoon. It's Robin Da Vinci. How are you? I am a baby boomer and I have done several apologies. And what I'm trying to do now is give back and help train new generations regarding financial success, credit cards, credit reports, checking accounts, all of those things. And I don't want to apologize for that. I want to do that and I want to do that well. So I want to give back. And yes, boomers have made a lot of mistakes, and there are things missing in our educational system that have you arrive in adulthood without all the tools you need to be successful. And I've touched on COVID and your cash and getting back to life after this pandemic. And then last episode, I talked about COVID and your credit report being a financial report card of your life to this date. And believe me, your credit report can govern your success in the future. It can stop you from buying a house. It can prevent you from getting the best interest rates. It can do a lot of stuff. It can interfere with your refinances, can interfere with the kind of interest rate you get on an auto loan. So um, watch that video and see what I'm saying about a credit report. But today, what I'm going to talk about right now, this very day, I want to talk about your credit cards, COVID and your credit cards. In general, your credit cards. Credit cards are the biggest boon to debt that the country ever saw. Before credit cards, people used cash. They didn't even get to write checks. You went to the bank. You had a very limited access to your own money. It was very, very strange. I don't know if you remember the days, and if you're too young, good for you. Banks would be open 10 to 3 Monday through Friday and not on Saturday. There were no such things as ATMs, none of that. It was really sort of archaic and crazy now that I look back on it. You had very little access to your money, and we had what they called banker's hours. So if you were a person that went to your job and only worked part-time, they'd say, oh, you have banker's hours, because banks were only open 10 to 3. And that came from the very old days. So, and it changed pretty rapidly once the 80s came and ATMs were everywhere and banks were open longer hours. And then they started opening on Saturdays. All those things happened. And in that happening came the big dawn of the credit card. Now, there were still charge cards in the 50s. There were charge cards, but the way that we do credit cards now and the limits or not limits they have on them was unheard of back then. You didn't go around with 6 credit cards and max them out and owe $90,000 on credit cards back then. That really didn't happen, but it happens now. It happens when someone takes advantage of everything that comes in the mail, signs up for every credit card that's out there. In the days when you went to the mall and you would sign up for a credit card in the store you were in, it was not unusual for someone to have a credit card for almost every store that was in a mall. And you'd get maybe an only $1,000 limit, but you would use it in that store. And you would use it to its max and then only pay a minimum payment. All of those things contributed to the consumer debt we have now. Massive credit card debt, people underwater due to their credit card spending. You have to understand that is part of an emotional response to purchasing and money. Always charging things, always needing to have something right away, always having to spend. And credit cards are a blessing, but they're also a curse. If you think about it, this credit card company, and maybe they charge you 29.9% or 16.9% or even 4.9%, and perhaps you have one of those, you have a credit card that you pay in full every month, and so you never pay any interest. But the point is that these credit cards are a blessing, but then they are very dangerous. So think about the blessing side. I'm going to look at you and say, what a credit card represents is a lender or a bank or an institution trusting you with money for a 30-day period and then expecting a payment at the end of that 30-day period that matches your minimum payment or is indeed paid off, or you add money to that minimum payment to make a dent in the principal balance you use. The principal balance is the amount owed on the credit card minus all the interest you've paid. Now, remember, a credit card gets, if you only pay down the minimum payment, the next time you go to pay and you've added things, they're going to charge you interest again. So a lot of people don't understand that. Let's say they put a refrigerator on their credit card for $1,200, and then the next month they can only pay $400. Okay, so they pay $400. The interest is charged on the $800 again. And then if you charge to that card again, that money plus the $800 you're carrying is going to be charged interest. It's not compounded interest, but in a way it is. I mean, you aren't getting away with anything. That original principal, until you pay off everything, is still going to be charged interest every month. And that is one of the reasons, if a credit card company sees that you're paying your debt, they will offer you more credit. And that's where people get into trouble. It's so easy to forget that you put more on that credit card than you expected to put, right? I mean, you get your credit card bill and you go through it and you say, wait a minute, I did that. I did that. What was I thinking? Or much worse than that, credit card charges keep charging on your credit card. You have set it up as an auto pay with a minimum payment, and you don't even look at it. You don't realize your credit score is being affected. You don't realize that your interest rate is going up, and you don't realize just how little principal you're paying on that credit card. So here are the important things in this short time I have with you. You need to understand about your credit cards. You need to go in and find the interest rate that you are paying on all your credit cards. Now, sometimes there's two interest rates, one for purchases and one for cash advances. You need to understand how much interest you're paying on all of your credit cards. Then you need to lay it out and come up with a plan to either get the highest one paid off or make room on that lowest one to transfer the balance and keep that high interest credit rate interest at a low or no balance. And then once in a while, if you're afraid that you'll lose, let's say you have a 5,000 limit, you don't want to lose that. Every once in a while, charge something on that card for under $100 and pay it in full when the statement comes. But what my problem is, and what I'm seeing is, all of you are not looking at your credit card statement every month to detect fraud, to see if the interest rate has changed, to see how much room there is on that card. And when it gets maxed out, that affects your credit report. So we can't do that. So here's what I'm suggesting. It's relatively old school. In fact, it really is old school. Who am I kidding? I'm old school. It's old school. I want you to know, take every receipt when you spend, if you charge on Amazon, if you go into a store, anything that goes on a debit card or a credit card, you need to keep. And then, yes, you need to print out your statement for a few months to get into the habit and attach those receipts to that credit card statement and check it off. Make sure everything is there. Make sure no one snuck in a charge on your card while you were at the store and they stole your information. It still happens. I had a friend who charged some Christmas presents. We walked out the door, and after we walked out the door, one of the clerks in that store, this was maybe 4 years ago, had actually used her card to charge their Christmas gifts. If you don't look at your card, if you just pay a minimum payment and you never check anything out, you could get really screwed. You don't want to be screwed. I mean, it's hard enough when you screw over yourself with your damn credit. It's not okay to let someone else do it. So look at your credit cards, get the interest amount that you're paying, both for cash advances and for purchases. Lay it all out, see which one's at the highest, which one's at the lowest, come up with a plan to either make room on that lowest card to move this high balance over, or make a plan to get this one zeroed out and not use it. whatever you do, don't cancel credit cards until your credit score is fabulous, because that open credit gives you points, good points on your credit score. So also keep your receipts, keep every single receipt, match it up to your statement, make sure no one's abusing your credit card. It can happen, I'm telling you, and get your credit card spending under control. Do not save credit cards on websites. Have to enter it. It gives you that extra minute there to decide whether you really need this. So you go on, they say, save this credit card information, say no. And then when you go to purchase something, you have to deliberately go get your information and sit down and manually enter it. And it'll give you one extra step. So if this is an emotional purchase, a real emotional purchase that you don't need, you'll have time to stop. Those are my suggestions. I'm hoping this has been helpful. I have a lot more on my website at robindavinci.com, and I certainly have a lot of exercises you can do in my book. My book is on Amazon. Look that up. You can get some tips on how to figure out how to handle your credit. Get that credit report, dissect that, and analyze your credit cards. It's the best thing that will ever happen for you. Don't be afraid. Put it all in front of you. Knowledge is power. Thank you for listening. Like if you can, and subscribe. Thank you.